Now that we have the quarters removed, next thing to do is pull out the steaks and then the rest of the ground beef. So along the backbone, you basically have two steaks. You have your loins and then your tenderloins. In a regular steak, that'd be the the porterhouse steak or T-bone. Porterhouse is just a big T-bone. So what I like to do for the tenderloin, this has got a little bit of bloodshot in it, so we'll have to see how that goes. But basically, I don't even like to use a knife very much. I just like to use my fingers to separate the membranes as much as I can. Tenderloin, as its name implies, is the tenderest piece of the tenderest cut in an animal. So it's right back here. So I'm just going to use my fingers and separate that. If I have to, I'll go in there with a knife for a little bit, but and we can just cut it here at the bottom. Get rid of as much of that bloodshot as possible. I think most of it's just in the membranes. And then when I prepare this, I usually do a butterfly cut. Get rid of that tougher membrane there. And take it all the way back. Now, that's going to be your tenderloin right there. Then the other steak is just going to be on the back side. That'd be your loin. And same sort of deal. I try not to cut any more than I have to. This one will have there's kind of a membrane that runs the whole length of it. So it's really up to you whether you pull that off now or just cut around it after you cook. But honestly, it depends on how sharp my knife is at the time. If my knife's still pretty sharp, then I'll cut it off. If my knife's not very sharp, then I'll just wait and do it when I cook it. So that's it's going to be right back up in here. And then you can see right in here where that rests. Watch yourself when you're doing this, especially if you have a knife in your hand. You definitely want to have a sharp knife to do this, but the problem with having a sharp knife is if you're not paying attention, you can end up with stitches. So pay attention, only cut the elk and not your fingers. This one's a little harder to do just with your fingers because you do have all that connective tissue right in the bone. A lot of times, if you clean the animal out in the field, you'll actually do this while the carcass is still intact. And if you do that, it's a little easier to pull because the rest of the carcass stays in place. And that's your loin. You can remove that silver skin if you want. Then the rest of it is just going to be hamburger. Got a lot of blood and hair and stuff on this outer skin, so just going to take and pull a bunch of that off, and that'll just get thrown away. Just so I don't have to worry about hair and bloodshot stuff in my hamburger. Try and keep as much of the meat as intact as possible. See right here, I got a pretty bloodshot spot there. Then all I'm going to do is just go through this and pull all the meat out of the ribs and off the bones, and that'll all go into hamburger. All right, so the front quarter, there's not too much loin. There's a little bit right here that we'll pull out. Kind of runs up through here. This one got shot through the ribs, so we do actually have a lot of bloody meat up in here. You can see we got, there's a little bit of loin comes right up here. So what I usually do with this, once I get the loin out, then I'll just bone it out and kind of start with the ribs because they're pretty easy. And then last thing I do is the neck because it's not easy and it'll dull your knife up pretty quick. So if you do the neck first, then you're going to have a dull knife for everything else. If you do it last, then you'll have a dull knife for the neck, but not everything else. So again, I'm only kind of cutting the minimum I have to, and then everything else. Got this tendon here. Tendons are never awesome in steaks, so kind of pull that out. There you go. There's the last half of your loin. There's nothing on the inside. That's just towards the back. The other thing you do have here, again, I got a lot of bloodshot meat here. I think we'll see what we can get. But the other thing you have are these slabs of meat like this. If you like fajitas and that sort of thing, they're actually pretty good for that. So you got blood underneath this one, but and then problem is I do have a fair amount of hair and stuff on the outside, so just have to kind of pull the top layer off, get rid of blood and the hair and the dirt and stuff. And then we don't do a lot of fajitas around my place, so this will just all go into hamburger. But if you like fajitas and that, and then this would be your brisket here. Never actually smoked an elk brisket. I think that'd be kind of fun. Cutting tenderloins, what I like to do is what they call butterfly. So you almost go all the way through, and then you go all the way through. Then you turn it like that. So almost all the way through, and then all the way through. Because the tenderloin's not a huge piece of meat, so by that, doing it that way, you get a little bit bigger steak. There you go. There's your tenderloins. That'll just be hamburger. Then as far as your regular loin, I cut them all. I like a thicker steak, so cut them about an inch. So you can pull that silver skin off now or deal with it when you cook it. My knife's getting kind of dull, so I'm just going to deal with it when I cook it. And then this one isn't technically a loin, I don't think. It's got some tendon that runs, or some silver skin that runs through it. It's still pretty tasty, so we'll cook it as a steak. There you go. That's all your steaks. Alright, so you can see I cleaned up a lot of this. This, when we started, looked all bloodshot. Didn't look like we were going to be able to save much of it. But once I pulled that bloody membrane off, there's actually a lot of savable meat in here. So now we'll just pull off these in layers and then cut through the ribs, save as much as we can, turn that all into hamburger. Before you cut out the rib meat, the one thing you do want to do is check the inside. Like if you've drugged the animal a really long way and the inside of the cavity got full of sticks and leaves and dirt and stuff, you may not be able to save that rib meat. If this is just all packed full of dirt, this is a super clean, so we'll be able to save all of this. Right here, got a little bit of hair we'll cut out. Then the other thing, since we cut this backbone in half, normally I would cut between these, but this is covered with bone dust, so nobody likes chunks of, like, see that? That's a chunk of bone right there. Nobody likes that in their hamburger, so I'm not going to pull that out of here, but I will be able to get all the neck. So we'll cut out the ribs, a little bit more of the brisket here, and then we'll pretty well be done, except for the neck. We got everything boned out. The neck is really hard. I wish I was a little better at it because there's still a little bit of meat there that I could possibly get out. Back up in here as well. Wish I was a little better at that. Got a little bit of bloodshot there, but for the most part, got all the good usable meat out of it. The next step will be to package up our steaks and then to make stew meat and hamburger.